Welcome back to a new episode where we are going to create a login script. So right in our includes folder, let's create a new file and let's name it login-inc.php. The login script that we will be creating is pretty similar to the register script. So if we go to our register.inc, you can see that we're doing a check if the user actually clicked the submit button in order to access this page. And well, this needs to be done in our login script as well. So let's go to our login-inc and let's create opening and closing PHP tags. And in our opening and closing PHP tags, let's create an if statement where we want to use the function isSet if the post method, so $_post, is clicked with the name submit. I can actually copy paste it from the register page, but for the sake of this video, I won't be doing that because I want to go through it one more time. Right now, we're checking if the user has clicked the submit button, but we want to do something if a user tries to access this page without clicking on the button. So let's create an else statement. Let's go to our register.inc and we need to copy a header and exit. Let's paste it in our else. And let's change the error to access forbidden. So whenever a user is trying to access this page, he will be redirected to the home page. So let's change that as well to the index page with an error which says access forbidden. Just like the register-inc, we need to create the connection to the database. So in our if statement, let's require in single quotes database.php semicolon. And what we want to do now is to grab the information from the input fields and save it in a variable. So let's create variable username and set it equal to $_post. And we want to check for a username. Let's copy paste it. Change the second one to password and the post method to password as well. And if we open our login.php, you can see that the name is equal to username and password. So now that we have assigned the post method username and password to a variable, we need to do some checks. And the first thing that we will be doing is to check if the user let one of the input fields open, because you need to have a username and password to log in. So let's create an if statement, and the condition is a function called empty, and we want to see if variable username is empty. And we don't want to create another if statement, so let's add 2 vertical bars because we want to see that if username or password is empty. So let's create another empty function. And now we want to check for password. And just like I said in the previous episode, be aware that you can easily make mistakes with the parentheses. Because while empty has 2 parentheses, and the if statement has parentheses as well. And if it's empty, we want to copy our error message, paste it in the if statement. And let's say instead of access forbidden, empty fields. I actually don't think it's necessary to send back information in the URL because it's not a sign up form. But if you want to, you can actually add the username inside the header function as well. But I will just send them back with an error message. So let's create an else statement. Because while we don't want to do any other checks, we just want to connect to the database and see if the input fields that the user wrote down matches with the database information. And you might probably think that this is pretty difficult to do, but it actually isn't. So inside the else statement, let's run an SQL query, so variable SQL, set it equal to double quotes semicolon, and inside the double quotes we want to select so everything, so star, from the table users where the username is equal to a question mark, and we're using a question mark because we're going to run another prepared statement. And now that we actually got our query, we want to initialize a new statement. So let's create a variable called stmt and set it equal to a function MySQLi underscore stmt underscore init. And we want to initialize it by referring to the connection. And at the top of our page, we required our database connection, so we can use variable con right here. Let's go back to databases.php so I can show you what a variable con is. And that's the database connection that we created. What we want to do now is to run the SQL statement and check if it actually works in the database. And this will be done exactly the same way as the registers page, what we did right here, but I don't want to copy paste it. So let's create an if statement, and inside the condition we want to check if it does not work with an exclamation mark. And what we want to check is function MySQLi underscore stmt underscore prepare. Because we're going to prepare the statement by running the SQL string inside the database and to check if the statement has an error inside of it or not. And if we get an error, there must be something wrong inside of your statement. So be aware that if something is going wrong, your select statement is probably wrong. So the MySQL statement prepare takes two params, and the first one is the statement, because that's what we want to check. And the second one is the variable SQL. What we want to do inside our if statement is send an error message because we're checking if it's not working. So let's copy paste a header and exit function. And let's return the user back to the index page, so the home page, and the error message is SQL error. Let's create an else statement, because what we want to do if the information matches is to grab the information from the database. So let's use a function called MySQLi underscore stmt underscore bind underscore param, because we want to bind the information that the user gave us in the input fields with database information so we can see if there's a match. We need to add params, and the first one is the statement, so variable stmt. The second param is the kind of data that we want to send, and we want to send the username, so in double quotes s because it's a string. And the third param is the actual data that we want to send inside of the database. So in our case, it's variable username. Once again, be aware that your bind param must be equal to your statement. So you do not need to pass in a password right now, otherwise your password will be in the column of the username. Now that we have binded our params, let's go one line below and let's create a MySQLi underscore stmt underscore execute. And we want to execute variable stmt. Now that we have executed the query, we want to grab the actual results and insert them into a new variable. So on the line below, let's create a variable called results and set it equal to a function called MySQLi underscore stmt underscore get underscore results. And we want to get the results from the statement. So in our parentheses, let's add $stmt. We're hoping that we're getting back everything from the database using the select statement right here. But if we look at our code right now, we can risk not getting anything back from the database. So result can actually be equal to nothing. Let's actually change it to result, because we're getting one result back. The if statement right here will only check if a query can be performed, but it won't check if we're getting something back from the database. So we need to run another if statement to check if variable result is empty or not. So let's go right below result. Let's create an if statement, and we want to do two things. We want to check if we're actually getting back a result, and if we're getting back a result, we want to set the result equal to a variable. So let's create a new variable in our if statement condition called row and set it equal to MySQLi underscore fetch underscore a sock. And what this function will do is it will fetch the data from variable result. Well, we actually need to pass in variable result. Excuse me. So what this function will do is it will fetch everything from variable result, and we're going to put it inside an associative array called row. And if we do not use fetch assoc, we will get raw data from the database, but we actually want to format it in an associative array so we can work with it. And if we're not getting anything back from the database, so let's create an else statement. Let's copy our header and exit function, because we want to send back an error message. And what we want to send back is no user, because a user is not found whenever this error message appears. So let's go right back inside of our if statement, where we are going to grab the password if we already have a person with the same username. And what I want to do then is to take the password from the database, hash it, and see if it matches with the actual variable password. So let's create a variable called passcheck and set it equal to password underscore verify. And this function will grab the password that the user has inputted, so password, which is also the first param, so let's add it, comma, and the second password is the password from the database. And since we actually created an associative array called row, we can write down variable row, brackets, single quotes, and I want the password. And be aware that passcheck will be a boolean because the system will see if it's a match or not. So we need to create another if statement below our passcheck. And inside the condition, we need to check if variable passcheck is equal to false. Because if it's equal to false, we don't want to allow the user to log in. So let's copy paste a header and exit function and change the error to wrong pass. Because whenever the passcheck is false, it means that the password and the password from the database do not match. But if the password is a match, we want to run an else if statement. Since we're dealing with sensitive information, you want to prevent any kind of problem and just do another check. And inside our condition, we want to see if passcheck is equal to true, equal to true. We actually need to create an else statement as well. And what we want to do in our else statement is basically the same as in the if statement, just to send them back with the same error message. But it's just an extra step security that I like to do. So let's go inside our else if statement, where we want to log in the user to the website. And in order to do this, we need to create a superglobal session, because the way a login system works is that the session has the information of a user whenever he signs in. And if a user signs in, we need to check if the superglobal session is available on the website or not. And remember, in our superglobal session video, I showed you how you could start a session by writing down session underscore start parentheses semicolon. Now we want to create session variables and set them equal to the information that we have. So on the line below, let's write down $ session, set of brackets, and let's set it equal to a semicolon. And what we want to set it equal to is variable row, so the associative array. But we don't want to check for passwords, but we want to find the ID. And we want to call our session variable session ID. So let's copy paste it one more time. And let's change it to session user. And we want to check for the username. I don't want to save my password in a session because a password is sensitive information. So let's skip the password. Now that we actually created our session, we want to redirect the user to the home page. So let's copy a header and exit. instead of sending an error, we want to send success. And the message is logged in. Right now, we created our session in our login-inc, but we need to create a session start on the index page as well, because we cannot check if a session variable is available in the website. A session variable needs to be on every single page. And the way we can do that is to go to our header.php, and in our PHP opening and closing tags, we want to write down session_start, because we're requiring our header on every single page. So every single page right now has a session. We also want to, give a message to the user whenever he is logged in. So let's go to our index.php, because if it is successful, we're redirecting them to the index page. So let's remove home. Let's create opening and closing PHP tags. And let's create an if statement. And the condition is a check. So let's create an isSet function. And let's check for $_session, brackets, single quotes. And let's say that we want to check the session ID. And whenever a session ID is available, we want to echo out, you are logged in. And otherwise, so else, we want to echo out home. Before we test our login page, we need to go to our login.php, and the action needs to be equal to includes/login-inc.php. I actually forgot something. Let's go back to our login.php, and let's set the name of our button equal to submit as well. Save it, refresh it. Let's change the name to Dari100 and the password to 12345. Click on login, and we're getting an error message. I think I actually made a typo, so let's go back on line 22, and it's get result. So let's save it, refresh the browser, and you can see that success is equal to logged in, and we're getting the you are logged in message. Thank you for watching this episode, and this was actually the last one of this course. So if you have any questions, or maybe you need more explanation about a certain topic, please send me a message, because I will actually make a video for you. Don't forget to leave a review, and thank you for watching this course.